The great chime hall of Xylos was silent, a state so unnatural it felt like a physical wound. Here, where the resonant frequencies of the conclave had shaped policy and philosophy for millennia, there was only the oppressive hum of the containment fields holding the void at bay. High luminary Kalen stood before the grand celestial orrery, his crystalline form, usually a vibrant lattice of sapphire and silver light, now dimmed to a troubled, muted blue. The orrery was no longer a map of their glorious dominion, but a testament to their encroaching doom. A creeping, featureless stain of absolute black was devouring it from the edge, a tide of non-existence that consumed stars, worlds, and the very light of creation. They called it the Null Cascade, a name that felt woefully inadequate for the ontological plague that erased all it touched. It did not conquer, it unmade. Around him, the other members of the conclave stood as statues of despair. Their internal light pulsed with fear, a discordant symphony of fractured chimes that only he, as high luminary, could fully perceive. The air, thick with the scent of ionized ozone from the straining power conduits, carried their unspoken terror. For generations, the Xylosian people had been the custodians of their galactic sector, a civilization built on harmony, logic, and the precise manipulation of cosmic resonance. They had believed themselves to be the apex of sentient evolution, their crystalline minds capable of perceiving the universe as a grand, intricate song. Now that song was being silenced, one note at a time, and they had no defense against it. Their most powerful resonance weapons, capable of shattering moons, had proven useless. Firing into the cascade was like shouting into a vacuum. The energy simply vanished, contributing to the silence. "The outer perimeter has fallen," came a voice, sharp and brittle like shattering glass. Prime Resonator Vorlag stepped forward, his form a deep, furious crimson. He was the master of their war forms, the architect of their now useless fleets. "The star system of Cygnus Anu is gone, not dark, not dead, simply gone from the fabric of reality. The sensorium returns nothing, not even quantum foam. It is a perfect void." A wave of dissonant chimes swept through the hall. Kalen did not turn. He kept his gaze fixed on the encroaching void in the orrery. "Are pleas to the Galactic Concordiat?" he asked, his own voice a low, resonant hum, a single, steady note in a chorus of panic. "Silence," Vorlag replied, the word a curse on his lips. "The Vontor hegemony has sealed its borders. The Cybrex Combine offers their synthetic condolences but will not risk their fleets. The others, they do not even bother to reply. They are content to watch us be erased, hoping the cascade will be sated by our extinction." Vorlag's crimson light flared, a testament to his rage. "They see us as a buffer, a dike holding back the inevitable tide. They will let us break." Kalen finally turned, his multifaceted eyes capturing Vorlag's furious glow. "And what of the final candidate, the one we dismissed?" Vorlag made a sound like grinding crystals, a Xylosian expression of contempt. "The humans," he spat. "The primitives from the Sol system. Their fledgling empire is a chaotic mess of warring factions and contradictory ideologies. Their space is a cacophony of noise, of unfiltered emotional broadcasts. They are not a serious people. To ask them for aid would be the final humiliation before our oblivion." To illustrate his point, Vorlag gestured to a side of the chamber, where a smaller data screen flickered to life. It displayed a montage of human activity, culled from their public transmissions. There were images of brutal, kinetic warfare, explosions blooming in silence, projectiles of metal and plasma tearing through crude ship hulls. Then it shifted to displays of what the Xylosians could only interpret as ritualized madness. Massive crowds of humans screaming in unison at deafeningly loud musical performances, their soft bodies writhing in chaotic motion. It showed their political forums, beings shouting over one another, their arguments driven by passion rather than logic. It showed their art, a confusing and often violent tapestry of conflicting colors and forms. It was a portrait of a species utterly alien to the Xylosian mindset of harmony and order. "Look at them," Vorlag insisted, his voice rising in resonance. "They are ephemeral. Their lives are brutally short. They live in a constant state of self-inflicted crisis. They glorify emotion, a biological flaw we transcended eons ago. Their technology is brutish, direct, lacking any elegance. They burn chemical fuels and fission heavy elements, polluting the very space they inhabit. They are a galactic footnote, a brief, noisy anomaly. What help could they possibly offer? A few dozen of their ugly, asymmetrical warships to be swallowed by the cascade like dust motes." Kalen watched the screen, but his perception was different from Vorlag's. Where Vorlag saw chaos, Kalen saw resilience. The humans fought, yes, but they also rebuilt. Their art was violent, but it was also filled with expressions of profound love and sorrow. Their music was loud, but it possessed a complex, layered structure that, while jarring, was undeniably potent. They were a species of extremes, a storm of contradictions. He saw a recording of a single human, standing before a vast assembly, speaking not of war or glory, but of shared sacrifice, of reaching for a common good despite inherent differences. The being's face was etched with weariness, but its voice was firm, resolute. It was an illogical, emotional appeal, and yet it resonated with a strange power. "They are not harmonious," Kalen admitted, his voice a soft counterpoint to Vorlag's fury. "But they are not brittle. Our own harmony has become rigidity, Vorlag. We have not faced a true existential threat in a million of their short years. We have forgotten how to adapt. We have forgotten how to endure suffering. These humans, their entire history is one of suffering, of surviving calamities of their own making. They exist in a state of perpetual struggle, not just against the universe, but against their own nature. Perhaps there is a strength in that we have failed to comprehend." "Strength, it is a flaw," Vorlag countered, stepping closer. The crimson light of his form pulsed, casting bloody shadows on the polished floor. "They are driven by ego, by fear of their own mortality. They do not think in cycles of millennia, they think in moments of fleeting passion. They would not understand our plight. They would likely see it as an opportunity. They would demand a price we cannot pay for aid they cannot give." "We sent a plea for help to the entire galaxy," Kalen stated, his voice gaining a hard, crystalline edge. "All have refused, all but one. The humans did not refuse. They asked for more data. They asked for our stellar charts, our resonance frequency analysis of the cascade, our historical records. They did not dismiss us. They began to study the problem." "A child studying a supernova?" Vorlag scoffed. "Their curiosity is meaningless. They lack the capacity to understand the scale of this. They are organic beings bound to the crude imperatives of flesh and blood. We are beings of light and logic. If we cannot devise a solution, how could they?" The debate hung in the air, a silent, shimmering tension. The other members of the conclave remained motionless, their internal lights wavering between the crimson of Vorlag's rage and the deep blue of Kalen's weary contemplation. They were a people paralyzed by the failure of their own perfection. Their logic had led them to a dead end. Their harmony had not saved them. And now, at the precipice of extinction, their last, infinitesimal sliver of hope rested on a species they considered to be little more than clever, dangerous animals. An attendant, a lesser functionary whose form was a simple, unadorned crystal, chimed softly from the edge of the chamber. "High luminary," it resonated, its tone thin with strain. "A new transmission from the humans." A heavy silence descended once more. Every facet of every Zalosian in the hall turned toward the main communication dais. This was it, the final, formal refusal, the moment their last, desperate hope was extinguished. Kalen felt the collective despair of his people wash over him, a cold wave that threatened to quench his own internal light for good. They had thought help would never come, and now they were about to have that certainty confirmed. "On screen," Kalen commanded, his voice betraying none of the cold dread that was solidifying within him. The main screen, which had been showing the horrifying advance of the null cascade, flickered. The image of the human ambassador appeared. It was a female of their species, her soft features framed by dark hair. Her face was pale, her expression unreadable. Behind her was not the bridge of a warship, but a simple, almost ascetic room. There were no flashing lights, no uniformed crew members rushing about. There was only the woman and the quiet dignity of her posture. "This is Ambassador Eva Rostova of the Terran Alliance," she said. Her voice was calm, clear, and translated into perfect, formal Zalosian, free of any accent or inflection. It was a voice that carried no hint of the emotional chaos the Zalosians had expected. "On behalf of the Alliance, I am authorized to deliver our formal response to your request for aid." Vorlag's crimson form pulsed with a final, bitter flare of defiance. "Then deliver it, human. Tell us you will stand aside like all the others. We are prepared for the end." Ambassador Rostova's eyes, dark and deep, shifted slightly, as if she were looking directly at Vorlag, though she was only an image on a screen. A long moment of silence passed. The Zalosians waited, their crystalline forms aced for the final blow. They were a proud people, and they would meet their end with the dignity of silence. Their final resonant chord a lament for a universe that had abandoned them. Then the human ambassador spoke again, her words precise and measured, each one landing with the weight of a collapsing star. "We have analyzed the data you provided. Our projections confirm your assessment. The Null Cascade is an extinction-level event of unknown origin. Your current defensive strategies are insufficient. Without intervention, your civilization will be extinguished within 3 of your planetary rotations. A low, mournful chime echoed through the hall. The blunt, cold truth of it was more devastating than any expression of pity. Therefore, Rostova continued, her voice unwavering, the Alliance has determined that non-intervention is an unacceptable ethical outcome. We cannot stand by and witness the erasure of a sentient species. She paused, and for the first time a subtle shift occurred in her expression. It was not emotion, not as the Zalosians understood it. It was resolve, a deep, ancient gravity that seemed to emanate from the very core of her being. A relief fleet has been dispatched. It has already crossed into your sovereign territory. Their orders are to assist in the evacuation of your core worlds and to engage the Cascade directly. The Conclave was stunned into absolute stillness. The chimes of their fear were replaced by a disbelieving silence. A relief fleet? Dispatched? Already in their territory? It was impossible. Human ships were slow, relying on primitive FTL drives that required weeks to cross the distances their own vessels could traverse in days. Vorlag was the first to find his voice. A fleet, he scoffed, though the sound was weaker now, tinged with confusion. Human, your ships would be annihilated before they even reached the perimeter. This is a meaningless gesture, a foolish sacrifice. How many ships have you sent to their doom? Ambassador Rostova's gaze remained steady. Our methods of transit are unconventional. As for the composition of the fleet, she paused again, and a faint, almost imperceptible sound could be heard from her end of the transmission. A low, powerful hum that seemed to vibrate through the very speakers of the Zylosian communication system. Perhaps it is better to show you. The view on the screen behind her changed. It switched to an external sensor feed from a Zylosian orbital platform, one of the last still functioning on the edge of the Cygnus-Anu system, where the void now gnawed at the edges of reality. The starfield was stark, beautiful, and terrifying. One half of the view was a tapestry of distant stars. The other half was the perfect, featureless black of the Null Cascade. Then it began. It did not start with a flash of light or the tearing of spacetime that signified a conventional FTL exit. Instead, the fabric of reality itself seemed to shiver. Pinpricks of light, smaller than atoms, appeared everywhere at once. They were not ships arriving. They were points of impossibility, of causality being gently but firmly bent. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing else happened. Then, as if a command had been given across the universe, every single pinprick dilated. They did not explode outward. They unfolded like cosmic origami, blossoming from nothingness into tangible form. It was not a fleet, it was a storm. Thousands, no, tens of thousands. The sheer number was incomprehensible, of sleek, dark vessels materialized in an instant. They were arrayed not in rigid battle formations, but in a flowing, almost organic pattern that filled the entire sector. They were smaller than Zylosian warships, shaped like teardrops or sharpened blades, their hulls seeming to drink the light of the distant stars. They were silent, poised, and they were everywhere. They had not arrived in the system. They had become a part of it, as if they had always been there, waiting. In the chime hall, a collective, involuntary resonance of pure, unadulterated shock rippled through the conclave. Vorlag stared at the screen, his crimson light flickering and dying down to a dull, confused maroon. His mind, accustomed to the elegant but predictable tactics of stellar warfare, could not process what he was seeing. This was not a military deployment. This was a physical law being rewritten. Before the Zalosians could even formulate a question, the Null Cascade reacted. The edge of the void seemed to surge forward, an invisible tsunami of annihilation rushing to consume the new arrivals. It was the moment of truth. Vorlag braced himself for the sight of the human ships being snuffed out of existence, a futile gesture silenced in an instant. But the human ships did not fire. They did not raise shields, they simply resonated. A low, deep hum, the same one Kalen had faintly heard from the ambassador's transmission, flooded the Zalosian sensors. It was a sound that seemed to exes beneath the normal layers of reality. It was not a weapons charge. It was a chord, a single, impossibly complex note being played on the strings of the universe itself. The human ships began to glow, not with the harsh light of energy shields, but with a soft, silver luminescence. They pulsed in unison, their light forming intricate, shifting patterns that flowed between the ships, linking them all into a single, cohesive network. As the cascade's edge of nothingness washed over the first wave of human vessels, they did not vanish. They held. The silver light of the fleet intensified, meeting the absolute blackness, and at the point of contact, something impossible happened. The void recoiled. It was not an explosion, it was a negation of the negation. Where the human resonance field touched the cascade, reality was not erased. It was fiercely, defiantly reaffirmed. The fabric of spacetime, which the cascade unraveled, was being actively rewoven by the human fleet. On the screen in the chime hall, Ambassador Rostova's face reappeared in a small window. Her expression was still calm, but her eyes were focused, intense. The null cascade operates by introducing a dissonant frequency into the quantum substrate, collapsing wave functions into a state of absolute zero potential, she explained, her voice as level as if she were delivering a scientific lecture. It is a weapon of entropy. We are not fighting it. We are tuning it. We are introducing a counter-frequency, a harmonic overtone. We are reminding reality of its own existence. Vorlag felt his entire worldview, his millennia of strategic knowledge, shatter. They had tried to fight the silence with noise, with overwhelming force. The humans, they were fighting it with music, a more complex, more powerful music than the Xylosians had ever conceived. How, Vorlag breathed the question, a faint, discordant chime of pure awe. What technology is this? It is beyond anything known. It is not merely technology, Rostova replied. It is a philosophical principle enacted. We call it the resonance accord. We discovered it not through a desire for power, but as a consequence of near self-destruction. Our species is fractious. For centuries, we were a chorus of competing, often self-destructive voices. We learned that the only way to survive was not to silence the dissonance, but to find the harmony that could contain it. We learned to listen to the noise and find the underlying music. We have applied that lesson to the universe itself. The human storm, as Kalen now thought of it, began to advance. It did not push the cascade back, it calmed it. The hard edge of the void began to soften, to fray. Pockets of space that had been erased flickered back into existence, ghost-like at first, then solidifying as the human ships passed through them, their resonant hum reinforcing the structure of reality. They were not just a shield. They were healers mending the wound in the universe. Kalen stepped forward, his own blue light returning to a brighter, clearer hue. He looked past Rostova's image to the main screen at the breathtaking sight of the human fleet turning back the tide of nothingness. He finally understood what he had seen in their chaotic transmissions. It was not a weakness. It was the source of their impossible strength. A species that could contain so much internal conflict, so much love and hate, art and war, faith and despair, and not tear itself apart, had developed a spiritual and technological resilience that a harmonious, monolithic culture like the Xylosians could never achieve. They were not brittle. They were forged in the fires of their own chaos. "You came," Kalen said, his voice resonating with a depth of emotion his people had not expressed in ages. "You knew the risk. You knew that every other power in the galaxy had abandoned us. Why?" Ambassador Rostova's calm facade finally softened, just for a moment. A flicker of something ancient and weary, yet profoundly kind, entered her eyes. Because one of our oldest philosophical texts contains a simple command: "Thou shalt not stand idly by." We have stood idly by before in our own history, and the stain of that inaction has haunted us for generations. We have learned that the cost of apathy is always greater than the cost of action. She took a breath. And besides, the universe is meant to be filled with voices. We will not allow a single one to be silenced if we have the strength to prevent it. Your song is not over, High Luminary. For the first time in 1,000 years, a pure, harmonious chord of hope chimed through the great hall of Xylos. It was a sound that had been long forgotten, and it was brought to them by the most unlikely saviors in the galaxy. The storm had come not to destroy, but to wash the world clean of despair. The days that followed were a revelation. Humanity did not operate like any galactic power the Xylosians had ever encountered. There were no demands for tribute, no claims of territory, no arrogant proclamations of their superiority. The human fleet, a force so vast it could have shattered the Xylosian civilization with a thought, acted with a quiet, almost humble professionalism. Their ships, which Kalen learned were called chorus vessels, maintained their ceaseless vigil at the edge of the receding cascade, their resonant hum a constant, reassuring presence in the Xylosian sky. High Luminary Kalen was invited to communicate directly with the fleet's operational commander, an individual who held the title of conductor. The meeting took place not in a formal diplomatic chamber, but in a shared neural interface space, a virtual environment of humanity's design. Kalen had expected a projection of a Spartan war room. Instead, he found his consciousness manifested within a simulation of a vast, ancient library. Shelves of what looked like bound paper texts stretched into an infinite distance, under a soft, warm light. The air smelled of old parchment and dust. The conductor appeared not as a uniformed military officer, but as an elderly human male with kind eyes and a face lined with the deep maps of a long life. He wore simple, comfortable robes and sat in a worn leather chair. He introduced himself as Admiral Aris Thorn. A library? Kalen resonated, his virtual form a shimmering construct of blue light. I confess I expected a more tactical environment. Admiral Thorn smiled, a gentle expression that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Every strategy, every piece of technology we possess, High Luminary, began here, in rooms like this. With an idea, a question, a story. To understand how we fight, you must first understand how we think. War for us is the last and most tragic failure of reason. We treat it as such. He gestured to the simulated space around them. This is a representation of the Alliance's central archive, the sum total of our species' knowledge, art, history, and folly. Every member of our fleet is connected to it. Every decision we make is informed by the triumphs, and more importantly, the mistakes of our ancestors. We do not trust in the wisdom of any single individual. We trust in the accumulated, often contradictory, wisdom of our entire civilization. This was the second great reveal, more profound than their technology. The humans were not just a collective of individuals. They were a civilization in constant, instantaneous dialogue with its own past. Their resonance accord was not just a physical principle, it was a cultural one. They had found a way to harmonize their countless, conflicting histories into a coherent, ethical present. Kalen spent hours in conversation with Thorn. He learned of humanity's dark ages, of their world wars, of the brink of nuclear annihilation from which they had pulled back. Thorn spoke of these horrors not with shame or bravado, but with a quiet, academic sorrow. He explained that humanity's greatest strength came from their most profound weakness, their capacity for error. Your people, the Zalosians, Thorn said, his voice gentle, strove for perfection, for a single harmonious note, and you achieved it. It is a magnificent accomplishment, but a perfect note cannot change, it cannot adapt to a new song. Humanity is a chaotic symphony. We are full of discordant notes, missed cues, and clashing instruments. But we are always composing. We can change our key, our tempo, our entire melody in an instant. The null cascade is a chord of absolute silence. It has no answer for a song that is constantly reinventing itself. Prime Resonator Vorlag, at Kalen's insistence, joined one of these conversations. His crimson light was muted, his arrogance replaced by a grudging, burning curiosity. He saw the human conductor not as a warrior, but as a scholar. He asked about their tactics, their ship designs, their power sources. Thorn answered every question with unnerving transparency. Our ships have no centralized reactors in the way you understand them, Thorn explained, conjuring a detailed schematic of a chorus vessel in the air between them. Each vessel is a node in a network. Their power is drawn directly from the quantum vacuum, a process stabilized by the collective resonance of the entire fleet. A single ship is weak. The fleet together can channel the energy of a star. He paused. But its true purpose is not to project power, but to achieve balance. The same field that repels the cascade can be used to nurture a nascent star, to stabilize a planetary core, to mend the very fabric of space where it has been torn. Vorlag was silent for a long time. The Zalosian way was to master a force, to perfect it, to wield it with absolute precision. The humans did not seek to master the universe. They sought to understand it, to listen to it, and to gently, respectfully, ask it to heal itself. Their greatest weapon was an act of profound empathy extended to the laws of physics themselves. Elves, you have given us this knowledge freely, Vorlag chimed, the note one of disbelief. Your greatest strategic secrets, why? Because secrecy is a tool of fear, Thorn replied simply. And fear is what created the cascade. We do not know its origin, but we know its nature. It is the logic of annihilation, of the belief that one's own existence is best secured by the non-existence of others. The only way to defeat such a philosophy is with its opposite, radical transparency, shared knowledge, and mutual trust. To withhold this information from you would be to succumb to the very thinking we are fighting against. The null cascade was being steadily, methodically pushed back. System by system, reality was being restored. Human and Zalosian scientists and engineers began to work together. The Zalosians, with their millennia of experience in cosmic resonance, were able to refine and amplify the effects of the human fleet. They learned to add their own unique, harmonious notes to humanity's symphony, creating a combined resonance that was more powerful than either could achieve alone. The cultural exchange was even more profound. Humans, with their short, passionate lives, introduced the long-lived Zalosians to concepts they had long dismissed as illogical frivolities. They shared their art, their music, their stories of love, heroism, and tragedy. The Zalosians, in turn, shared their deep, meditative understanding of the cosmos, their ability to perceive the slow, grand rhythms of the universe. For the first time, the chime hall was filled not just with the harmonious chords of Zalosian logic, but with the vibrant, chaotic, and beautiful noise of human culture. One day, Ambassador Rostova contacted Kalin again. Her expression was more serious than he had ever seen it. "High Luminary," she began, "Conductor Thorn's fleet has pushed the cascade back to what our sensors indicate is its point of origin. It is a single, gravitationally significant point at the edge of your galactic sector." "What is it?" Kalin asked, a new kind of tension, not of fear but of anticipation, resonating within him. "We do not know," Rostova admitted. "It is quiet, too quiet. The cascade seems to emanate from it like smoke from a dying fire, but the source itself is inert. We are sending a joint exploratory vessel, a human ship with a Zalosian delegation aboard, including yourself and Prime Resonator Vorlag if you are willing. We believe it is vital that we see this together." There was no hesitation. The journey to the source was made in a human vessel, a long-range exploratory ship named the Odyssey. For Kalin and Vorlag, the experience was disorienting and profound. The ship's interior was not the sterile, crystalline perfection of their own craft. It was designed for soft, fragile bodies. It was warm, the air filled with a complex mix of filtered oxygen and the faint, organic sense of its crew. They saw humans eating, sleeping, arguing over a game of chance, and then turning to their duties with absolute focus. They were a people who embraced their contradictions, who lived them every moment. As they neared the coordinates, the universe outside the viewports grew strange. The background hum of the cosmos faded. The stars themselves seemed distant, their light old and tired. And then they saw it. It was a megastructure, so vast it defied comprehension. A perfect sphere of black material that did not reflect any light, its silhouette visible only by the stars it occulted. It was impossibly ancient, its surface smooth and unmarred by the passage of eons. It dwarfed any creation of the Zalosians or any other known race. The null cascade was a faint, hazy nebula bleeding from a single, almost invisible seam in its surface. The human fleet, the storm that had seemed so immense, was a swarm of dust motes next to this silent, cosmic monolith. "Our analysis indicates it is not a weapon," the human science officer reported, her voice hushed with awe. "It is a containment vessel, a prison, and the null cascade is not the weapon. It is the lock, a failing one." As the Odyssey drew closer, a new energy reading bloomed on the sensors. The sphere was not inert. Something deep within it was stirring, awakened by the proximity of the fleet and the receding of its containment field. A signal, impossibly powerful and complex, was being broadcast from the sphere's core. It was not a language of sound or light. It was a language of pure mathematics, of fundamental concepts. The combined analytical power of the human ship and the Zalosian delegates worked to translate it. It was not a message of welcome. It was not a threat. It was a recording, a final testament left by a civilization so ancient it had no name. The translation appeared as text on the main view screen, the words stark and chilling against the image of the black sphere. "We are the builders. We were the first to sing in this galaxy. For ages we shaped worlds and ignited stars. Rs, we thought ourselves masters of reality. We were wrong. We learned that the universe is but one page in a book, one bubble in a sea of foam. And from outside, from the silent spaces between the pages, something was watching." The text continued, telling a story of cosmic horror that dwarfed the threat of the null cascade. The builders had encountered a consciousness from outside the known universe, a being or force of pure, predatory intellect that did not consume matter or energy, but meaning. It fed on complexity, on information, on the very thing that defined life and civilization. They called it the silent adversary. It does not hate, it does not desire, it hungers. It turned our most advanced civilizations into simple matter, our deepest philosophies into random noise, our very history into forgotten chaos. It does not kill, it simplifies. We could not fight it. To engage it with our minds was to feed it. To use our power against it was to show it where we were. Our only solution was to build a cage, this sphere. We lured it inside with the promise of our entire civilization's knowledge, our final tragic gift. We turned our own energy against ourselves to create the cascade, a field of absolute null information, of perfect meaninglessness, to hide it from the rest of the galaxy, and to starve it for eternity. A cold dread, far deeper than the fear of simple annihilation, settled over the bridge of the Odyssey. Kalen and Vorlag felt it as a chilling of their internal light. The humans stood frozen at their consoles, their faces pale. The final lines of the message appeared. The lock is failing, our energy is spent. We have been silent for an age, and our final duty is this warning. The hunger will be free. It will hear the vibrant noise of your galaxy. It will hear your songs, your thoughts, your dreams. And it will come to simplify you. Flee. Or prepare for a war not of matter, but of meaning. The long silence is ending. The message ended. The bridge of the Odyssey was utterly still. They had not defeated an enemy. They had merely knocked on the door of a cosmic prison, awakening the prisoner within. The null cascade had been a shield, a mercy. By pushing it back, by reintroducing order and complexity to this region of space, they had just rung the dinner bell for a god. Admiral Thorne's face appeared on the main screen, his expression grim, the warm light of his virtual library gone, replaced by the cold reality of the tactical display behind him. "We hear it," he said, his voice a low whisper. "A psychic resonance, it's listening." Kalen looked from the terrifying sphere to the faces of the humans on the bridge. He saw no panic. He saw no despair. He saw the same quiet, resolute gravity he had first seen in Ambassador Rostova. He saw a species that had looked into the abyss of its own self-destruction and had chosen to live. He saw a people defined not by their perfection, but by their unyielding, often illogical, refusal to give up. He turned to Vorlag. The prime resonator's crimson light was gone, replaced by a steady, brilliant white, a color the Zalosians had not used in millennia, the color of pure, focused creation. Vorlag was no longer a warrior. He was a builder again. "They thought help would never come," Kalen resonated, his voice soft but carrying across the silent bridge. He was speaking of his own people, of their despair only days ago. But now the words had a new, galactic meaning. For eons, the builders have been silent, their warning unheard. He looked at Thorne's image, then at the human crew, until a species born of chaos and noise finally grew loud enough to hear it. Admiral Thorne gave a slow, solemn nod. The song of the universe is not always a harmonious one, high luminary. Sometimes it is a scream. Our purpose is not to silence it. It is to answer. Outside the human fleet, the great storm of silver ships began to move. They were not retreating. They were reforming, their fluid, organic patterns shifting into something new. They were turning away from the now tamed cascade and toward the colossal black sphere. They were arraying themselves between the prison and the galaxy, between the ancient hunger and the countless voices it sought to silence. They did not know if they could win, but they knew they would not stand idly by. Kalen felt a new resonance build within him, a chord that blended the ancient, perfect harmony of the Zalosians with the fierce, adaptive, chaotic symphony of humanity. It was a song of unity, of shared purpose in the face of impossible darkness. Their small war was over. The true war for the soul of the universe itself had just begun, and for the first time in a very long time, the galaxy was not alone. Humanity had arrived, and they had brought the storm with them.